Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar series, and thank you for joining us for this special webinar on historical government funds for the childcare industry. Today, my guests are Cindy Lenhoff as well as John Rizzo. Cindy leads the NCCA, which is the National Child Care Association, and provides amazing and great advocacy for our child care industry. John Rizzo is part of the IC360 Financial Experts team, and he's the managing partner at RDG AMP. And before we get started, we tend to go through an agenda and a few housekeeping items. So we're going to do that today. I hope you're having a great July week for those of you out there. Today, we're going to do a few housekeeping items first. We have another webinar coming up July 27th, which we'll talk about, tell you a little bit more about Healthy Advantage and financial experts. Then we'll introduce Cindy as well as John and go through the presentation with them where they'll be discussing those two different elements. And if we have some time, we'll do some Q&A. So one of the first housekeeping items is your toolbar that you have in front of you here. You'll see a couple different things. You'll see a Q&A, you'll see a chat, and you'll see polls. What we're going to ask you is if you have questions to please use the Q&A section. So if there are questions, please put them into Q&A. Everybody gets to see those questions. We don't duplicate up on a lot of the questions then, if there are some. And we also have Rob Spatola, who is in the background for our financial experts. He'll be trying to answer your questions as we talk about some of the financial elements that are out there, or at least collecting them so we can answer them in a response email to all the registrants. We will be doing a poll later on in this presentation. So you would just click on when you see the poll pop up, you'll have an opportunity to engage with the poll as we have it. The chat function is if you are interested in something that we talked about, you want to get connected either to Cindy and learn more about NCCA, or you want to get connected to John and team or to us about anything that we talk about here today. So with no further ado, we're just going to get started here, and let's go ahead and talk to you about our upcoming speaker. We have the pleasure of having Beth Canning coming on. If you don't know who Beth is, she is a speaker and a trainer. She's done a little bit of the circuit within the childcare field. Beth and I actually had a really good conversation today because she was really wanting to fully understand sort of the things that she talks about around successful onboarding, which she wants to talk about in this upcoming presentation, and about discussing values, which we're huge believers in, and an onboarding system, which she talks about the theory behind it. And we talk about how we actually help help people do it actually, and the values of training and onboarding, and then moving away from a paper-based environment to an online environment. So those align perfect with Inspire Care 360, but it really is a genesis of Beth's ideas and thoughts. That is coming up July 27th at 1:30 p.m. and we look forward to having you register for that event. As usual, members will always get free replays for that. Non-members, we have the one-time presentation at this point. And let's do one of our housekeeping items. Again, we are starting to get towards open enrollment season. So typically a lot of people make decisions in the fall about healthcare benefits. We were just talking to a prospective member for Inspire Care 360 who's extremely interested in Healthy Advantage because they are just getting crushed by the healthcare costs, in addition to the need to offer a healthcare benefit to try to attract and retain their staff. And so they learned a lot about Healthy Advantage. The program is highly affordable, as low as $11.50 a paycheck, up to $30 a paycheck for an individual, but it gives them substantial benefits. It is also highly flexible because it allows them to choose what they want to have, anywhere from doing office visits and specialist visits to things such as adding on hospitalization, dental and vision, a maternity program, group life programs, things of that nature. Super easy to implement because with this program and no additional cost comes a benefit consulting team. The benefit consulting team is the one who talks to your staff, who informs them fully about the programs, who talks to them about the differences between a major medical and this type of a program, and then also discusses how they sign up. And then they sign up right with the benefit consultants who does it for you and then sets it up with your payroll company, either automated or a manual process with your payroll company. But that takes you out of the mix. And it's also compliant for meeting the Affordable Care Act, Part A especially. It meets that requirement. And the only thing that you should know is that there are minimums for the program. So you have to have at least 10 people who join, as well as it does take a little time to implement because we have to coordinate a few things. So if you do have an interest, send a chat to us or just reach out to us later by responding to your registration, and we will be sure to give you more information on it. As you will learn today, John Rizzo is part of our financial experts. Our financial experts for all who come into the program have an opportunity to get a complimentary review up front, but then they have an opportunity to look at, do they want to work with financial experts? We've had a number of different companies join and they have done substantial work for them. They've really helped them get to dollars through PPP or ERC money or tax credits that they didn't even know was there, as well as some of looking at back taxes and the like. So it's helped out an awful lot. What they've also do just great is really looking at your key performance indicators. If you're not familiar with that term, it really is what are the things that indicate that you're doing really well within your business and what can you really move the needle on. They help you with those elements, from like your occupancy to looking at the revenue and the tuition, how you discount today, where you should and shouldn't possibly discount, how to look at social service programs, CACFP, looking at how to get to higher levels of operational profit. Did you know on average that most child care schools average between 5 and 10% profitability? The objective is really to get you up north of 25% profitability. And when you think about that, that's one school that has 100 kids on average and about 10,000 a kid. That's $1 million revenue school. The difference between 5 to 10% profitability as to 25% is mammoth. And they're there to fully help you get there. And they're also there to really help you look at taking advantage of these programs. And that's why they're part of this presentation today. So they can help really look at a lot of the different statements and help you with strategy well beyond a CPA or a bookkeeper. So today is our special guest. We have Cindy joining us from NCCA and John. So Cindy, if you want to come on board, Cindy, again, is the Director of National Child Care Association, NCCA. And if Cindy, you want to turn on your video for us and your audio, we look forward to you joining. Hopefully we didn't lose her in the process. There she is.
No, you didn't. And I even relocated myself in the process. So.
Ah, I see. Yes, you are. You have a different background.
Yes.
So that's awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much. And I think you're down in sunny, no longer stormy Daytona Beach, right?
Actually, I'm in Virginia this week, but Daytona is my home and it's been raining a lot.
Yeah, I was there last week. So for no further ado, people don't want to hear about our personal lives here. They want to hear a little bit more about what's going on. You brought a wonderful presentation. You guys have been amazing advocates. And I would say to everybody out there that if you are not part of NCCA, please consider joining. They are partners in all of our schools and our centers in trying to advocate the government nationally. And they've done an amazing job. And part of these funds that Cindy will be talking about today is from the direct work that her and her team has done, along with the push of many other entities like Child Care Aware and the like. But Cindy, let me stop sharing. And so you can start sharing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tony. And now I got to remember how to bring up my PowerPoint.
So as long as your PowerPoint's open, all you have to do is go to the share screen.
That's right. Thank you for that reminder.
No problem.
All right.
Zoom is not everybody's first.
It is not mine, but I've learned a lot. Well, as always, Tony, we appreciate your partnership and support of the National Child Care Association, and also all of the work you do with providers that can benefit from the type of help that you provide. I know that I work with a board member on the NCCA that utilizes some of your services, and she speaks very highly of them. And but I know that you're going to talk about money and how to get away from being so close to losing your business, because a 5% margin is a dangerous place to be. And unfortunately, some of you may have found that to be even more true during COVID. And so what I want to do is update you to the work that organizations like the National Child Care Association, Child Care Aware of America, First Focus, the National Women's Law Center, ECE, the Early Childhood Consortium, a conglomerate of us have been working on your behalf to give childcare a bigger, more unified voice in Washington. And one of the things I'm finding is that a lot of owner operators and educators out there don't always know what's happened at the federal level that could really help them, and how to access it. So hopefully I give you some ideas on that, and also some of the bills that are currently before Congress that you may want to have some input to. So let's just start out by saying, first of all, the child care industry has long been underfunded, and I don't think I need to spend a lot of time on that. And we have been making do and trying to keep high quality in place while we survive as a business. And remember, we are a business, and if we do a great job for kids, that becomes good for business. But you can only stretch a dollar so far. Parents can only pay so much. So one of the unique things about COVID, as catastrophic as it has been, is it has shed a light on just how essential you are. Every one of you on this call are the most essential, because in the end, you were the reason people got to go to work, that had to still report to work. And also think about it. Where were a lot of the children that could not go to public schools this past year? They were with you in a virtual learning classroom. Well, our US legislators have really gotten the message that we are essential, and that without childcare providers, the economy could actually collapse because people would not be able to go to work. So now's a good time to know what's going on, and a good time to know how to benefit from it and how to continue pushing forward, because everything that we've gotten in the past year will be temporary and be gone by the year 2024. So we need to make some of these things permanent, and that's what we're working on now. First of all, there were 3 bills passed that contributed to child care funding. First was last March, not this past March, but March 2020, we got $3.5 billion added to the Child Care Block Grant. So some of you last summer may have gotten some funding from the state through the Child Care Block Grant to help parents and or your business survive during the reduction in enrollment and the increase in cost of supplies to do cleaning and maintain a really healthy, safe environment. The second one was passed this January, early in January, and it's known as the Corona Response and Supplemental Act, and it gave $10 billion through the Child Care Block Grant. And all of this money has already been distributed to your states. So I hope you're receiving some of it. And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in just to make sure everybody knows that if you haven't received some of it, and we need to speed through here just to make sure we make our timing, but don't be surprised. Some states like New York have been very, very tight about spending that money, where other states have been rather open and funding their schools. So if you haven't received it, doesn't mean that you missed something yet. So just want to make sure.
And thank you for saying that, because I'm going to talk about how to start getting some of that money, or at least getting some attention to the fact that you know it exists. So then finally, in March of this year, the American Relief Package was passed, and care got an historical $39 billion. This is huge, and I'm going to try to run through this. So the funds were meant to cover direct services and subsidies, such as waiving copays, increasing provider reimbursement rates for your subsidy children, or supporting school-age children that you were taking care of, virus mitigation and practices, which included cleaning supplies and PPE supplies, like gloves. I mean, we're going through gloves like there's no tomorrow. And then, of course, grants and assistance for childcare providers to help support them with increased operating expenses. I mean, even things such as paying your rent. And again, not everybody got it. So moving forward, I just want to say that the Office of Child Care at the federal level is encouraging states to spend their money. And the biggest part of this money, the $39 billion that's coming, it's been divided into two categories: $15 billion for CCDBG, which is the Child Care Development Block Grant, which is given budgeted every year, given to the states to help pay for your subsidy children. So, and then there's another fund that is actually meant to help reimagine childcare. This is huge, but your state should be using this money to prioritize using the funds to raise subsidy payment rates to you, increasing childcare workforce compensation, and they are advising states to take bold steps to support children's developmental needs, choices for parents, and increased access to assistance for parents. And in addition, the guidance encourages supply building activities. In other words, getting more infant and toddler care available, especially during non-traditional hours, setting payments based on the quality of care rather than the traditional market survey, because that's what's held down rates in our industry, is the way the block grant's been written. That's why some of you get less than it really costs to keep a child, which might mean you don't have the child doesn't have access to your center. Also paying childcare subsidies based on children's enrollments rather than attendance, because in most states right now, you only get paid if the child is there. If they're absent, you don't, or you have a handful of absence days, but your teachers are still there and you're still holding that slot. All right, the spending deadlines. The CARES Act, the one that was passed in March of 2020, is going to have to be spent by December 2021 or your state loses it. The second bill, the CRRSA, Rescue and Relief, they have until September of 2022 to spend it. And the third, the ARPS Act, the $39 billion, the big amount of money, they have until December of 2024. Now, again, if they don't spend it, it all just goes back to the federal government. I want to give you a brief example of how much money we're talking about. In 2000, I used New York because that's where Tony does business. In New York, in 2019, New York received a total of $420 million in federal funding for childcare through their yearly allocation of the Child Care Development Block Grant. In 2020, as COVID started, New York received nearly the same as in 2019, with an additional $164 million in CARES Act funding for childcare. In 2021, New York has been allocated an additional sum of $2.3 billion. So you can see how this is escalated, and you can see why more childcare providers need to be asking for this money. I ask you, do you know how much your state received in childcare stimulus funding? Well, that's available to you on this website that I have posted right here. And I could actually bring it up, but I don't think we have time. But if you'll write down this website and go to it, you'll be able to find what your state is getting in this last batch of stimulus money.
And what we'll do is at the conclusion of this, we will also send out this website address through the chat and to anybody who would like it.
Because I think once you know, they say knowledge is power. I don't think your legislators or your governors know that
Mhm.
that they have it and they might be sitting on it. So do you know how much your governor and state legislature and lead agency are spending, how they're spending the money to support childcare? Well, here's another website, and it's actually through the Office of Child Care. The ACF stands for America Children and Families. But I always call it the OCC website. But this is another one you might want to hand out, Tony,
Yep.
because in January of this year, they had to write a report. Each state had to turn into the federal government what they were going to do with this money. Now, keep in mind that they are not bound by federal law. There's no accountability. They can change their mind. But you will be able to see what they said they were going to do with it. And maybe it just is a matter of the childcare industry working together, and we're going to talk about how to do that, to say, hey, this is what you said you were going to do, but we haven't seen it yet. Let's get together and talk about why we need this.
Absolutely. And what we'll do, Cindy, is we'll actually send your presentation to all the registrations today.
Okay. And the one thing I really want to emphasize is we are an industry that has been very quiet for many years and just kind of taken, what we were given. And it's really time to become advocates. And I know it's hard to take time away from your center, but I have some really great ideas. And a lot of these came from Christina Powell. She is head of the Child Care Association in Maryland, and she is a wonderful advocate, and she also helps others advocate. And I asked her if I could use her plan, because while it was a lot like my own, I love the way she spelled it out. So the 3 C's of advocacy: collaborate, connect, communicate. Join a child care association or some kind of organized group, or even the Chamber of Commerce in your community. Because I will tell you, the Chamber of Commerces nationwide actually have gone to the federal government as a whole and spoken to legislators and really put out there the need that they have for good childcare. So their people, the businesses have help. So find a group, make a group of people of like-minded people that are wanting some help and go after it, because it's there. Join committees or councils that represent the Office of Child Care in your state. It's not just about your child care licensing worker. There are people that they look for people to join committees to help with some decision-making. Get familiar with the legislators in your district, your governor's office, administrators of ECE training programs in community colleges, and be a presence in your community. Connect, don't complain. That's a big part of what happens. If you go out there and all you want to do is tell your sob story, they're not going to hear it. So keep in mind that you're there to make a connection and introduce yourself and introduce what it is you really do. Find common ground and tailor that communication to the agency that you're talking with. And always, always put children first. Years ago, somebody told me that when you're talking to your legislator or your governor's office, don't use the word profit. Talk about children. Yes, we make a profit, but we really make a living. It's our job. It's how we make a living. Childcare licensing people, they make a living off of children. They just don't call it profit. They call it their paycheck. And we're losing centers nationwide. And that's always a good statistic to take to your legislator or governor. And typically you can find data information online about how many centers closed and how many people are losing access to quality childcare. Remember, you are a stakeholder, an essential business that needs to use your voice and work through advocacy organizations for change. And I can't emphasize enough, there's a few things that you want to take with you. We call it advocate, act, and ask. Ensure that the leaders at multiple levels understand the scope of the childcare crisis that has been building for years, which has been greatly exacerbated by the pandemic. And better than tell them, show them. You might need to produce some financial statements. What would be wrong? I mean, most legislators are very astute financially and business-wise. And I have to wonder how many of them would own a business, and many of them have. You know, how many of them would run a business at a 5% margin? They wouldn't, because you don't have enough money to reinvest back in the business. Thus, the buildings start falling down. And, you know, and you lose the quality of the product that you're selling or putting out there. So think in terms of being a business person, but you are speaking about what children need. They need playgrounds. How many of you have a playground that needs to be replaced? Think about things that would benefit children that you need money for. So
Cindy,
ask for.
let me jump in for 1 second. You've given some fantastic sage advice, and you continue to, and I know you're going to continue with a few other things about how to ask and how to advocate. One of the things that I would just wanted to mention is a lot of times there's a lot of owner operators on here. We're like, oh, we're just so busy. It's tough to spend the time to do this advocacy work when I'm just trying to keep the wheels on the bus. One thing that I've learned, and I've seen other peers out there do as well, is something that I am definitely trying to do, is I've taken some of our talented people on our team. For instance, one of my key team members here has become on your board for NCCA.
Absolutely.
And she is a very strong thinker in the industry and the welfare of children. So that has been super important to her personally. A lot of these advocacies that you can get involved with, you can look at these as opportunities for your key staff members, especially those who are really passionate about the industry, passionate about children, passionate about the progress here. So it doesn't always have to be you, but it does get you streamlined directly into what is actually happening. So it's not like you find out 3 or 4 months later that some kind of grant came down to replace playground equipment, but you could have been on the forefront of that, for instance. So back to you, Cindy. I just wanted to add that little value.
No, I'm glad you put that out there, because you're out there, and people need to hear the stories that pertain to this. And I know that when I was an operator in Oklahoma for many years, I was part of the governor's advocacy or advisory committee for children. And I worked really closely with licensing on changing standards. When they were determined to change them, I got to represent the childcare community so that we found some middle ground to make sure that we weren't changing something we couldn't afford. And I will tell you, whenever a grant came up, guess who they called? Cindy, we didn't know if you knew, but there are grants available, and they're only available for 30 days. And you have, if you want to apply, we're just trying to get people to apply, and we haven't had a response. So that's the kind of thing you're talking about, Tony. There's a lot of opportunity if you're out there networking. I think that's networking.
Yes, we have about 5 minutes for you left before we move
okay.
on.
Well, again, ask for a more adequate share of your state's allocation of the federal funds. There's nothing wrong with going in and saying, hey, I heard the great news. We have X amount of dollars. And I was wondering, how is our state going to spend them? And I will give you an example. The state of Virginia is one that I work pretty, because NCCA is located here, and I have a fellow board member that I work with. And she, in the second stimulus pack, she just received, she's got 2 centers. And one of her centers received, because it's licensed for over 100, she takes no subsidy children. But this money, this extra money from stimulus, even though it's funneled through the child care block grant, can go to any child care center, unless your governor or your legislature says that it can't. But the feds opened that door. She just received a $40,000 grant check for her center licensed for over 100, and a $20,000 grant check for her center licensed for under 100. And she's got another one of those coming because they still have money. They're also paying co-payments for all of the parents in Virginia that have a co-payment until the end of 2022. And they have changed from paying for attendance-based children only to paying for their full program, whether they're there or not, till the end of 2021. And they also shipped out box loads of PPE products. That's the kind of money that they have. And Virginia is really doing well with that. And there are examples when you pull up that one website. I would say, you know, now's as good a time as any to get out there. And again, do it with professionalism, do it with business savvy, do it with your passion. We usually have a lot of passion, but we got to apply the other things to it. And if you are working with a group or just by yourself, develop a priorities agenda, like a one-pager that says, these are the 3 things that I need more than anything, that we need as childcare providers to provide high quality child care. Things like, we need for centers to be compensated for the fact that they're not as full as they were before COVID. And that one of our issues is that we need to be able to raise pay so we can get them filled again, because we lost a lot of our workforce and a lot of them aren't coming back. And we need something to, you know, raise the amount of pay for what these individuals have done over the COVID, because until we do, we're going to keep losing members of this workforce. Also, find champions. There are senators in your particular you know, legislature, or there are representatives, and they are champions for this, and they can talk to some of those legislators that aren't. And again, do not focus on problems and complaining. Go in and share your issues, the things that keep you from being as high quality as you would like, or the things that are going to keep you from being as high quality as you have been. And what are some of those solutions? And then I would really say, if you don't get to the table early, you're going to be part of the menu. It's going to be decided for you. And I know that time can be a problem, but we spend a lot of time talking to each other and complaining. And sometimes it's just a matter of picking up the phone or emailing. And quite frankly, as a member of the NCCA, you actually get information from us on a regular basis on how to contact your US legislator if we are asking for bigger numbers at the top. And all you got to do is push a button. It goes right to your you put in your zip code and it takes you to your senator and representative, and you can type in an email message and we'll even tell you what to say. We usually use Child Care Aware's database for that, and they allow us to do that as a member. So I would say ready, set, go. Be prepared, because look what's coming down the pike. All right, look what's on the table. We've got the current issue where y'all need to get some of this money if you're not getting it. Sorry, but sometimes my 30 years in Oklahoma come out as y'all. But here's what you're going to be needing to know more about. And as a member of the NCCA, we are keeping our people well informed, and we will need voices at the federal level. Let's face it, we're not the NRA. We don't have the money to hire a lobby. We only have our voices, and we don't have enough. But right now you have proposals from the White House. Our administration has got 2 bills on the table that would have put about $450 billion into childcare. Now there's good and bad in that. The good is that's a lot of money and we could use it. It could be bad though, if none of the stakeholders say, this is what we would like to see, how it's used. And we can, I'll give you my email address and information at the end of this, and Tony will get it out as well. And if you want details about these bills, I can send you like 2-page summaries. And then you can get back to me to say, we're worried about this, or we love this. And it's just really critical. I mean, we can represent you, but we need your help. And then from Congress, there's actually 5 bills on the table right now. One that's really gaining a lot of strength is childcare for working families. It was introduced before COVID and was gaining some speed, and then COVID put it, on the back burner. And now it is out there getting lots of support. And this is a bill with a ton of cash behind it, about $700 billion, $10 billion a year for 10 years for childcare. And it will truly change the way the business operates. UPK will be across the board, universal pre-K. Now, that's probably going to happen because there's such a force behind it. But we at the NCCA have partnered with the ECEC, and we are having calls every other week as a group called Mixed Delivery Champions, because we want to be heard about how this can be done and include us and make sure that we get fairly compensated for it.
Cindy, we have about a minute left.
Okay, I'll leave you with 2 thoughts. To reimagine childcare, we must think out loud together. And so we can't have too many different messages. But the NCCA is here to make sure that we form a message that is based on as many people doing business out there that will tell us. We've put surveys out. You can contact us. I do always want to say this. It's one of my favorite sayings. I'm sure you've heard it. If you always do what you've always done, you're going to get what you always got. So let me ask you this. If you've never advocated and you've never put forth a little bit of your time in this area, you're going to continue to struggle, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, because we can't continue raising our prices so much to parents and at the same time hiring people at wages that don't bring us the quality individuals that we need. So this is my contact information. I would love to hear from anybody that needs anything at all out there. And again, for $30 a year, you can join as an individual, and you'll receive communication from us weekly via email, and how to be an advocate, what we're advocating for. I answer all kinds of questions. People call me all the time. And then also, if you're a center, it's $100 for a year for a center. And the center, that allows everybody in your center to also be members, so that when they got to renew their CDA or their CCP, their credential, they can do so under your umbrella as a center member. And that way, not all of your staff have to pay the $30. So I know I rushed through this, but I'm so grateful to have had the time to do it. And you're welcome to send out the PowerPoint if you want, Tony.
Yep, we absolutely will. Cindy, you're just an amazing resource. I know we only have an hour worth of time altogether. So anybody who has questions, are going to ask you to direct them towards Cindy. And Cindy, thank you so much for joining. I'm going to ask John to join now. So Cindy, you can stay on, or you can go off video, whatever works for you. John, if you want to pop on, we'll go ahead. And this is John Rizzo. John is managing partner of RDGNP, as well as one of the IC360 financial experts. So John, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Hey, always. We're really happy to have you. And obviously, I think a lot of our audience has gotten to know you a little bit. So, as you saw, Cindy with her advocacy has brought a lot of great information about what the advocacy has done to bring some of these things to bear. Now, and I think you'll explain this better than I, a number of these things aren't things that are coming directly to the schools, as sometimes some of it is going directly to the families. And so why don't you tell us a little bit from you looking at some of the data, what your thought process is, as well as, what you want to talk to us about today.
Yeah, well, first of all, Cindy, it was great. Thanks for sharing that information. It's great to see an advocate out there, trying to get this money into organizations' hands. That's the biggest issue, that there's so many programs and billions of dollars that exist. And some of these programs are so complicated, or the states are just moving so slow that it's hard to actually get these dollars into organizations and individuals' hands. So that's really what we would be advocating for, is to help, get these dollars into everyone's hands.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I don't know if you wanted to do some presentation at this point, John, and have at it.
Yep. So I'll share my screen. We do have a presentation here. Some of this information, Cindy did an excellent job already covering, so we're just going to kind of skim over some of it. But really, the focus of what we want to talk about is, the government funding, the child care industry government funding. I'm your presenter today. Thanks for having me back. So we do have an agenda. The stimulus funding we're going to get into. We're going to talk about PPP and ERC. Those programs that we talked about before, because those are still out there. There's still money in those buckets as well. We want to make sure everyone's capturing those. And if we have time, like Tony mentioned before, we'll cover some questions. If you do have questions in the meantime, just put them in the Q&A, and Rob Spatola is here in the background, and he'll handle all those questions. So on the stimulus funding, like Cindy had mentioned, there are 3 buckets of funding. There's billions of dollars here. If you add them all up, we have the CARES Act, which came out in March of 2020, $3.5 billion. We have the Consolidation Appropriations Act, which launched at the end of last year. And then the newer one, which is where all the focus really is right now, with the $39 billion, like Cindy mentioned, the American Rescue Plan, the ARP, that just came out in March. So, and there's, we have until almost the end of 2024 for that funding. So there is time for that one. So there's a lot of funding is the point of this, and the progression of these different programs, that they continue to add funding for childcare. How can you obtain it? Well, there's several programs, and it is different from the PPP, ERC, where that was all the federal government, and there's one program, and it was easier to apply, and then they utilize banks and payroll companies to help get that money into your hands. This one's a little different. You are relying on states. States do have the money. States do have to come up with the programs. You need to review the programs on a state-by-state basis. You have to contact those in government, like Cindy had mentioned. We're on the same page there. Here are some that are already out there: the Office of Child and Family Services, Department of Social Services, Department of Health and Human Services as well. I need to leverage the national and local child care agencies. And we can also help, as well as Cindy and some other organizations that, basically these programs are customized to each state. So it's not like we can present on every state all at once, but we can help you navigate the programs within your state if you need help. We broke out some slides here on what some of these states are already doing. So the Child Care Development Block Grant, here's a New York example. So the requirements, as Cindy mentioned before, you got to check some boxes in order to obtain these dollars. But step one is it's continuation of the Essential Worker Scholarship. Families can apply for OCFS. Providers are paid directly, right? So this comes directly to you. The Child Care Business Continuity Grants, all providers can receive up to $10,000 there. There are additional tuition recovery funds, and this is used to cover your operating expenses. So this is just an example for essentially the employment of essential workers. There's $25 million available for child care scholarships. That started in June, so a few weeks ago. And it's through the Office of Children and Family Services. And this is kind of the link where you can apply for this grant. So this is just one example of how some of the funds that trickle down to New York State are being dispersed and how you can apply for them. But like I said before, you need to learn each state's requirement. How much did my state receive? Cindy put a link out there. We also have a link for that. We just kind of summarize, the top 5 states here. So you have Texas, California, Florida, New York, and Georgia. So the top 5 states received about 36% of these dollars, $14 billion. The rest of them received 25 billion, or 64%. So again, if you're in Texas or California or one of these states, there's billions and billions of dollars available for you to apply for. Grant availability. So the stabilization fund. So this is similar to the CDBG. Each state and territory is responsible for creating and administering a mechanism to distribute these funds. We did find 6 states here that are now accepting grants. So hopefully some of you are in these states, but you also can look up, and we could send out our PowerPoint slides as well, Tony.
Yep.
You can also look at the other states here and which states are ready to go and what the dollars are, what the programs are. So that would be a step 1 for me, that you actually drill down into your state. Here's an Illinois example. So there are programs out in Illinois that are already launched. It's the continuation of the child care restoration grants. So providers apply with the Department of Human Services in Illinois. It's a quarterly grant process. So round 2 just closed at the end of June. So the next quarter will be your next chance to apply. You must be open full-time by the end of the quarter to qualify. At least 25% of your revenue must come from private sources or child care assistance programs. And grants can be used for payroll and other operating expenses. So similar to PPP and ERC, the use of these funds generally are to keep people employed. And the state of Illinois is on board with that as well with their grant. Oklahoma. So we looked into Oklahoma, the Stabilization Fund. Here's an example for Oklahoma. They have child care grants. They actually have a nice link on their website that kind of takes you through the process and what you can use these dollars for. But again, Cindy had mentioned this. You can use the dollars for wages and benefits, rent, utilities, cleaning and sanitation. Again, very, very similar to the PPP program that allowed you to use dollars for these same items. And you need to apply by July 30th in this case if you're in Oklahoma. So on the horizon, the American Families Plan. So this is the newer piece here. There's significant provisions impacting early childhood education. Early access to universal access to high quality free pre-K for 3 and 4-year-olds. Establishes child care cost to income ratios for those earning less than 150% of the state median income. Expansion of nutritional assistance for children and families. Makes the child independent care tax credit permanent and refundable. We've talked about that in other webinars. And the earned income tax credit is expanded for childless workers. That's now permanent. So there are more things coming through with the American Families Plan.
And John, I have to jump in while you go through these. I think between what Cindy has said and what you guys have said, I think our heads are probably spinning a little bit with all this childcare, this childcare, that. We're in the childcare industry, but we have so many different things. What are your thoughts just in general of trying to, if someone's just trying to organize their brain around this? If you were an owner and let's say you were in, I don't know, let's say that you were in Pennsylvania and, how would you go after it? Obviously they can go to guys like you as part of our financial experts and talk to you about, sort of helping see your way through that. But personally, how would you do it?
Yeah, I would start with the link that we put out there, and Cindy had a similar one of what's happening in your state. So
Okay.
you can I would go to your state websites. A lot of the information we found were directly on each state's website. And then from the state's website, you can drill down to each municipality, each county to see what the different programs are, because the states then will trickle down this responsibility to specific groups within your county specifically. So you need to drill down into which agency is managing these funds in your area. That's the first step. Once you identify the agency that's managing funds in your area, then you need to contact them to learn about the programs if it's not clear through their website. Yes, plan B would be to contact a group like ours. We could do that same navigation for you, just like we did in preparing for this presentation. But there is some work to be done to figure out where the dollars are.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that. It is a bit of a challenge. I know for a fact that our licensors are actually, for our county, for my schools, are actually managing some of the distribution. It's sort of an odd thing that our licensors are doing it, I could tell you right now that if we didn't speak up and ask about it, they would not have reached out to us. But once we spoke up and asked about it and said this, they basically put us on the list. And now I just sort of bug them every couple of weeks. And so they are giving me updates. So we are being proactive, like Cindy said, like you're saying.
Yeah, most of these agencies, they're not-for-profit agencies. They're not always out there actively promoting things. They don't always have the budgets to properly promote and market. So unfortunately, you'll have to do a lot of that legwork yourself.
Cool.
All right, so the next part we want to touch on is just a quick update on the PPP loan forgiveness. So we do have a poll here that Tony was going to put up here.
Actually,
And
there's two of them. There's
yeah,
two
we'll do
questions.
two. We'll do two at the same time. So was your PPP loan forgiven is our first question. And then the second, have you applied for the ERC credit, the employee retention credit for 2020 or 2021?
Yep. So for those of you, most of you know, and John, you could talk about it, but pretty much PPP 1 and 2 are pretty much done at this point. But now we're sort of in the forgiveness stage, correct?
Correct. We're in the forgiveness stage, which is really important because if you don't officially have your PPP loan forgiven, it is a loan that you have to pay back. So that's the issue that we're finding, that some are just forgetting that they received this money. There's one more step left in this process.
Yeah. And I assume that, and you might be getting into this, but I assume the place to go for that is to the banker that you talked to originally for the PPP.
Correct. Yeah, each
Okay.
bank has their own process for accepting PPP forgiveness loan applications.
So let's go ahead, let's end the poll. And what we're going to do is we're going to share the results. And so, well, that's great news, obviously, for the PPP loan forgiveness.
Yep, so 88%, most people have already had it forgiven, so that's good. There's nothing else to do there. For those of you that haven't, you certainly should look into that. For those that don't know, you really should look into it to make sure that, you know, your loan was forgiven, because last thing you want is your $100,000 loan or whatever it was, you have to repay it, and those funds may not be around anymore. As far as the ERC, so we have 32% have applied for the ERC. Some are in process, 12%. Some think they don't qualify. I would probably challenge that group based on the understanding of the rules, and some haven't done it at all. So I think there's an opportunity that, you know, there's 68% of you have not applied or are in the process or don't think you qualify. So that's where the opportunity comes in with the ERC credit. So let's talk about that a little bit. On the PPP loan forgiveness, so this is all about timing, right? So when you have 24 weeks to spend the money, and then you have 10 months from that point to obtain forgiveness. So we put a little timing example here. If you received your PPP in April 2020, you had until the end of September of 2020 to spend the money, and then you had to receive your forgiveness approval by roughly the end of this month, July. All right, so there aren't any groups at this point that would have missed this period for forgiveness, but we're getting really close to it. And the period you could select is between 8 and 24 weeks. There is a requirement in how to spend those dollars, almost very similar requirements to all these child care grants that have come out. You have to spend at least 60% on payroll, 40% on these other items, like you see, rent, utilities, interest, software, property, all this protection stuff. And again, you have 8 to 24 weeks to spend the money. You have to maintain your employment. So that was one of the requirements, that you need to get back to your base period of number of employees. And there are safe harbors that allow you to do that allowed you to do that through the end of last year. And you need to maintain employee compensation. So you can't reduce anyone's pay by more than 25%, essentially. They need to make at least 75% of what they were making pre-COVID. So there are some rules about you being able to have those dollars forgiven. We asked this question about the ERC. So let's talk about the ERC here for a minute. So the ERC is basically a credit that ranges between $5,000 and $7,000 per employee per quarter, depending upon the period we're talking about. The original credit from 2020, your business operations either had to be fully or partially suspended because of COVID. That's an automatic in for the ERC credit if you were fully or partially suspended. If you weren't, then it goes to gross receipts, which is more or less your sales or deposits. Your gross receipts needed to decline by 50% or more in any quarter of 2020 compared to 2019. So you need to review this quarter by quarter. I would argue with some of you that said you don't think you qualify, because I'm pretty sure across the country, most childcare facilities were at least partially suspended because of COVID. So you'd have to look at those time periods and government mandates that said, hey, you can't operate at full capacity from this date until this date. So each state kind of handled that different, but that's what would get you into that credit if you weren't down 50% or more.
Hey, John, let me add to that. Just for those of you, from the personal experience with my schools, what I did is in New York State, where my schools are at, what I took a look at was we had a constricted amount. So we weren't able to use all the square footage in our classrooms, which reduced our ratios that we had to have. So even though we were still at maybe a 4-to-1 ratio for infants, or for a toddler in a 5-to-1, we were put in a situation where we couldn't have as many kids using a larger classroom. They said there's no more than 8 kids, let's say, for a toddler room at all. So that means that we were constricted in that room. Same with preschool, same with others. So we looked at the difference. And this is what John's team can really help you do to make sure you can apply. I will tell you, it is a substantial benefit to have the ERC. I didn't realize how much I actually paid in payroll taxes to watch some of that money come back. So, and John's been doing that. Him and his team have been doing that yeoman's work. If you are not sure, it's worth reaching out, because it's a lot.
Yeah, it adds up. And if you take for last year, 5,000 per quarter per employee, if you had 20 employees, that's $100,000. This year, it's $7,000 per employee, per quarter. So again, if you have 20 employees, that's $140,000. So we've helped companies obtain millions of dollars through this ERC credit. In a lot of cases, it's more money than the PPP was for those companies. It's just not publicized as much, this program, as the PPP was. 2021, same rules, other than you only have to show a 20% decline in gross receipts instead of a 50% decline. So that's big. And also, they're allowing Q4 of 2020 to be a 20% decline as well. That's kind of a loophole with this system, but that's a benefit too, that you may have been down 20% in Q4 of 2020, but not 50%, you still would receive the ERC credit. This is all handled through payroll, through your payroll company, but we can assist with the calculations and the payroll amendments if needed. So that's was everything we had prepared. I know we're tight on time. I don't know if there's any final questions to put in there. I know Rob's been cranking away answering the questions that have come in so far.
Yeah, again, for those of you who do have questions, the Q&A section is where those questions will be answered. And for those of you we do not get to today, we are already over our time, but I know there was a ton of interest in what we're doing here. So with that said, it is really important that what we do is get as many of your questions in and try to get back to you those kind of answers. Again, I want to advocate for both groups, for both Cindy as well as for John and our financial experts. They both are doing yeoman work again with advocacy for Cindy's group and John, and helping you find and get those dollars. And honestly, these are two investments that pay for themselves time and again. So with our limited time, we are going to send both presentations to all registrations. So thank you very much. If you do want a credit for it, you obviously can get a certificate credit as a learning credit. But with that said, you're welcome to reach out to me about anything that Inspire Care 360 can do or anything in the future. I'd like to thank you very much, Cindy, and I'd like to thank you very much, John, for your support on this. And everybody, you'll hear from us soon. Please join us on the 27th at 1:30 for Beth Cannon. But all of you have a wonderful rest of your week and have a great day. Take care, everybody.